So really good to see you again, Heather.
Good to
I
see you.
thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. As you said, the day we're recording this, my episode just came out on your podcast, which is very exciting. I'm excited to re-listen to that and check that out. And one of the things that was really interesting about our conversation to me was you kind of got me to talk about adversity, and I don't do that very often. I don't get to do that very often, and what I didn't realize is as you were sitting on the other side of the virtual table here asking me those questions is that you've also been through an incredible amount of adversity, whether it be in life or in business, in work. And that really seems to be the seed for a lot of your why and what you're doing. So tell me a little bit about your version of adversity that you've been through.
Oh my gosh, this is so funny. I was speaking to a friend of mine this morning who's very religious, and I was saying, why is it that everything is so hard in my life? I'm constantly facing adversity, to your point. And he said, maybe much like in the Bible, Heather, everybody was facing adversity, and that's really their point, and that's what brings them to their mission. And so I appreciated the way he explained it to me that
Hmm.
maybe that's the beauty of the journey, right? That's the reason of the journey is to embrace all these challenges and show others that not only am I capable of embracing them and overcoming them, but everybody is.
Big time. And it seems to be a common denominator for everyone's lives. I think there was a point in my life where I thought, bliss is the game, and like you just be in your bliss bubble and just be happy and just keep pushing through no matter what happens. But I think as time has gone on, I've learned that adversity, obstacles, challenges are ultimately like integral to life. They're not just a part of it, but we wouldn't develop any sense of character or have any burning desire to accomplish anything if we weren't going through some level of adversity. You went through, adversity in particular in your TED talk that I was watching. The type of adversity you went through in the corporate world is so common, and that's how unfortunate. And you personally, even like you talked about, even physically, like going through pain as a
Mm.
result of this. What was that like?
Yeah, I believe that this is something I've learned now at 47. I wish I had known this when I was younger, but when you start physically feeling ill, losing hair, having trouble digestion, trouble sleeping, those are all flags to get your attention that something is off course in your life, right? So anyone listening right now, please take that as a red flag, pay attention to it. I tried to tune it out and say, oh, I'll just push harder at the gym. I'll work out more and I'm going to be fine. I ended up throwing my back out because I was carrying
Oh.
so much stress from a toxic work environment that it was manifesting in my body.
So I had chronic neck pain for so many years, and I kept on going down the rabbit hole of medicine and scientific interventions to try to fix it. And it wasn't until I made an adjustment in my mind and what I was carrying and holding that I released this pain. And it's funny, the back stuff you're mentioning, there's this great doctor. He actually passed away a couple years ago, Dr. John Sarno. Have you ever heard of him? He has this whole thing about healing back pain and how most of this is like just it's an inner game, and the majority of like back pain that we see in the world is due to this like stress. And so it's funny you say that because stress and the things that happen to us are like really they do create these like physical ailments that are unavoidable. So like for me it was the neck, and then I started learning like, oh, if my neck hurts that's like a sign like something's going on. I need to take a step back. I need to address this. And you said it even affected your like hair and everything, which as a woman must be like this most terrifying feeling, right? That's a terrible feeling.
It's more stressful. It puts more stress on you. So it kind of just starts spiraling to really, really grabs your attention quickly.
Yeah, big time. So a lot of the type of adversity you talked about is really common for a lot of people. And actually, I've faced examples of this too, but it really comes down to a type of competition in the workplace that is not healthy. There's good competition. I'm sure you agree with that as an former executive, right? So what's the difference between good competition and the type that is like toxic and just purely bad, not only for the organization, but obviously bad for the people that are like, in battle with each other?
Good competition is necessary, especially in any organization where you're selling a product or service, right? You want to have a team of people who want to compete, who want to be recognized for, winning and growing and advancing and are motivated by that. So I've run sales organizations my entire career. I'm incredibly motivated by competition. I love competition for my teams, my people, and myself. I want to win, right? However, that's a competition that everybody knows they're playing in. When you sign up, oh, we're going to have a team here and we're going to post numbers and my job is to try to get to the top. Okay, I'm clear. This is a competition. These are the rules of engagement. Here's a transparency around what's happening. That's healthy competition that you opt in for. What's unhealthy that I've experienced in corporate America in a toxic work environment is the competition you don't know you're in, right? You're at work doing your job, like I used to call it, staying in my lane, running my division at the organization. Little did I know there's someone on another path or position in the company is secretly competing against me and I don't know what's happening. The competition that you don't know is occurring is the most unhealthy one.
That's a really cool distinction. So, how is a person supposed to deal with it? Because oftentimes we either choose to ignore it or we face it head on. And then all of a sudden, I think at times one of the risks of facing it head on and like really going to battle with a person is that your eye like goes off the ball. And then all of a sudden, instead of like doing a really good job for yourself or helping the organization move forward, you're stuck in this little bullshit drama with somebody and you never intended to be in the first place. And so everybody's losing. So I know every situation is different. I'm sure your situation was unique, but like, is there a right way to sort of deal with these bullies and these dramatic people that are obviously extremely emotionally intelligent when they come up?
Number one, in my opinion, doing nothing is never the answer. That is not the answer. I did that, right? So I learned the hard way. Ignoring bad behavior is the wrong answer. You are teaching people how to treat you. So don't go down that road that I went down, because what I did was I diminished my confidence. I silenced my voice in hopes it would allow somebody else to amplify theirs. That didn't work out that way. Instead, I started teaching people it's okay to treat Heather poorly. She's fine with that. And that
Wow.
was so the wrong road to go down.
I mean, it's kind of like, what it was like in like classrooms in the schoolyard, right? Like, if you don't tell the bully to fuck off, like, sorry, but like, if you don't draw a line and say, like, no, you're entering a zone that you're not allowed to cross this line, like, they just repeatedly will. And it's almost like you see in like the movies, they just sit there and prod you and poke at you. And I think it's the same in the real world, especially in like competitive environments, like sales environments. I actually come from a sales environment as well. So, like, I've seen like really great sales leaders and sales people who are like just awesome at competing, and they kind of motivate you and they talk shit and they're like, look at my number, and it's a good thing. It's like you motivate each other. But if you're diminishing other people and you're putting them down, not only is that bad where you get caught up in that, but the whole organization loses. And I think this is what people get wrong. So many people get caught up in these like little games with other people. So on the one hand, you kind of have to avoid it, but you can't avoid it when it's like this and it's toxic, right? Because it's a distraction, but you're saying to just attack it, like just hit it head on. So like, would you just literally respond by like saying something? Would you draw a line? Would you involve other people? Like, what's the right way to handle it and go like, no, I'm not gonna let you do that?
I love illustrating answers and stories. So let me give you an example, right? So back then, when I was in this company, I was there when I gave birth, right? So I had just given birth, and my then CEO called me on the phone a couple of days after I had my baby and said, "Hey, I need you to jump on a plane and go deliver a keynote for me. I
Wow.
can't make it. I've got, I need to rely on you to do this." I said, "Okay, sure." And I hung up and I was crying. I couldn't believe that a couple of days after giving birth, I had to go jump on a plane. And I was very angry about this. And it was just a horrible experience. Fast forward to now, if that had happened now, Armand, and that person hypothetically called me, I would have said, "Hey, hang on, I'm going to email you the pictures of my newborn. I just gave birth. Let me go ahead and send these photos over to you from the hospital and I'll call you right back." And then I'd call him back and say, did you see the pictures of the baby? Listen, I don't think I'm in the best condition right now. What do you think of sending Bob or Jerry in my place? I think they'd represent us better. I would handle it not in an attacking or negative way, but I make my point that, hello, this is not going to work for me, right? But I didn't know to do that when I was younger. Instead, I would just allow someone to treat me poorly, not have boundaries because I was trying to be the team player and I wanted to get ahead.
Yeah.
But in the end, this is the biggest thing that I've learned from all this is you might not be at the right company. Here's the good news. There are other companies, right? So that wasn't the environment for me. That was not the company for me, but my life didn't have to stop there. And for some reason, I couldn't get around that idea of, wow, maybe I could find a different or better place for me to land.
What you're talking about resonates with me so much. You're obviously a very likable person. And, especially people like you and people like me who seek to build good relationships with people often find ourselves in those situations. But do you find it funny how some people have absolutely no problem drawing lines? I think it's kind of a personality thing. And I think people like you going out and talking about this stuff is so important because the majority of people want to be liked. They don't want to cause drama. They want to be a team player. They want to be cool. They want to help the team grow. And so the most common answer typically in those situations where there's a big ask is sure, I'll figure it out. And then the phone hangs up or the Slack meeting ends or whatever, Zoom call ends and it's like, oh fuck, what am I going to do? But some people seem to have this ability to just I always find this fascinating. They're very good at saying not just no, but continuing to be respected after saying no. And this is something I'm sure you've been thinking about because it's wait a second, there's a way to actually respond in a tactful way here where I present another idea or I'm essentially saying no, but I can still be liked. My likability doesn't come down to me saying yes all the time. Do you think about that often? Have you talked to people about this?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the ways that I've kind of worked through this as I'm learning how to implement, stronger boundaries and be more direct and clear with my asks is I've channeled those people that you just described. And everybody listening right now, somebody out there that is exactly how Arman described them. They're well liked, they're well respected. However, they have very clear boundaries and they wouldn't allow themselves to be treated poorly. The next time you find yourself positioned with a very challenging ask that you don't want to do, channel that person. Think of how that person would respond and do the best that you can to step into those shoes. And the more you practice and the more you really try to channel that persona, you can kind of take that on as your own.
Yeah, and over the last few years, something I've learned that I think people would find interesting, and you would think that generally people that agree and say yes are more successful. But actually, when you look at this from a personality perspective, and my listeners know, I have my own sort of personality assessment, and I've kind of dug into this stuff. And one of the things that I found is that being disagreeable in general, obviously working hard, very important. Conscientiousness as a whole, being diligent, being organized, super important to being successful. And by the way, we're defining success as moving up in the work world and making more money. If that was what success really came down to. The people that are more disagreeable in general are more successful. And it's really interesting because if you really do look around, sure, you see plenty of people that are, agreeable that work their way up, but I think it's harder for them. It's more challenging for them, and they have to navigate more. And I've found when I've started having more boundaries, when I've started being more disagreeable, and disagreeable sounds like such a harsh word, but it literally just means the ability to speak your mind and have your opinion, and people see it and hear it and they're like, okay, that's this person's truth. And they're also drawing a boundary around what's important to them. We tend to respect them more because I think we all kind of want to be like that. So as you said, it's you need to remember what that person's like so that when it comes down to it, you can emulate it. I think we all kind of want that because we all should care about ourselves. We all should have good self-care. So I just think that's super fascinating that it's kind of counterintuitive. The more I am disagreeable and I draw boundaries, the more I may end up actually being liked, which is just ironic. So Heather, you've obviously shifted from this high performance team of thousands of people, corporate America world, to becoming an author, a TED speaker. You're running this incredible business. How's that shift been? Like, what's been the biggest differences, and how do you like it?
It's hard. Oh my gosh. The funny thing is we all are conditioned to routine or whatever we know, right? And so for me, I thought I was wrong. I thought corporate America was this well-lit environment that I could clearly navigate past through. I knew what the next promotion was. I knew the timeline. I know what the quarterly meetings are the expectations are. It felt so clear and well lit to me. Conversely, going out on my own after I got fired, it was like operating in the dark. I didn't know what the next step was. I didn't know what to sell. I didn't know, can I be an author? And how do you sell books? Like everything it's a humbling experience to go from the top of an industry, with a big title and a lot of responsibility that was earned, to starting over as a beginner and really not having that roadmap. That's been the hardest part of the whole thing.
That I couldn't agree with you more. It was quite a shock to me too. Well, what's been helpful so far in terms of like resources or people to like help navigate this space? Because it's like you're in the abyss, right? It's like you could go any direction. No one's going to tell you it's right or wrong or anything like that, which is pretty scary for a lot of people. So like, has there been anything that's been helpful?
Yes. Oh my gosh. So number one, firing your villains has been the most powerful thing for me. That day that woman thought she fired me, I fired my number one villain in my life. And what happened as a result of that, amazing people started showing up out of nowhere. I mean, it was the most bizarre thing that when I look back now, when you look back, you can see the dots connecting. I can see it's because I removed a negative person out of my space. Suddenly there was space for positive people to show up. And just person after person started showing up and genuinely wanting to help me and to help me find, again, like you said, it wasn't laid out in front of me, but it helped started steering me into opportunities and things I would have never even considered doing. So the people that you surround yourself with and network with, it impacts you immensely.
Yeah, yeah, big time. And did you find when you started actually like proclaiming and telling people like, I'm going out on my own, I'm going to do my own thing, that a lot of people kind of came out of the woodworks to support you and be like, by the way, I know this person or I can help you in this way? Like, did you get a lot of that?
Yes, but I got just as many people coming out saying, this is a terrible decision. You've made it in corporate America. Go find another industry to get back into. You should not go out on your own. So just as many people that tried to show up and help me navigate this unknown area, just as many showed up trying to pull me back into the old one.
And really, it's just their own projections, right? Those aren't entrepreneurs talking. Those aren't
Right.
people that have ever done it. But like the entrepreneur out there is going to say, "Oh, great, Heather, welcome to the club. Like, how can I help you?"
And
Totally
that's it.
different.
You totally get that, but I didn't at the time, right? So
Right.
I wouldn't understand,
Me
oh,
too.
who should I be listening to? One thing that I want everyone listening right now is, and this is exactly what you just said, never take advice or direction from someone who hasn't been where you're going. And ask yourself that question. Is this person that's speaking to me right now, have they been where I want to go? If the answer is no, end that conversation.
I mean, it's such a simple one, but we all forget it. And we get caught up in that moment because we know we're making this huge shift in our lives. And it's like, well, shit, I better be smart. I better listen to people. I better take in all the opinions. And they're worthless. These opinions are worthless. It's really about like, what do I individually want to try? Like, what's the worst case scenario here? Am I willing to try that? And then who are the people that have done it that I can actually get advice from that can help me? It'd be like talking to a traditional finance banker about crypto, who's like, that's a terrible, because to them, that's like a cataclysmic event. That's like the end of traditional finance. Decentralized finance, completely the opposite. It would break everything apart. Getting advice from that person about joining a crypto company is insane. They're never going to say anything positive to you about it. But we do that. We all do that. And I think we just have to remember. We have to remember what you said. We have to remember these moments. Like it's really challenging. So you've now stepped into this world. You have been already from, again, how we define success. I think we should personally define it. But from the outside looking in, To me, you are an incredibly successful person because of the way you show up with consistency, with conviction, and everything you're creating. And you're pumping out so much content. And I think, yeah. So you're obviously very successful at what you do. And you have your new book coming out. Can you tell me a little bit about this book and enough to kind of get people to jump on the pre-order train?
Yeah, so my new book is called Overcome Your Villains. I actually keep my book cover right behind my head to try to beat it over everyone else's head so they don't forget about it. But it's essentially what it is a three-step process that anyone can employ in their life or in their business to overcome any adversity. And it's really around the three-part system is beliefs, actions, and knowledge. And I was challenged a couple of years ago by someone who was much further ahead than me. A gentleman was speaking to me about my speaking business, and he was saying, you need to create a program, a very simple program that you can sell that other people can repeat so people can have the same kind of success that you've had. He said, so stop yourself and start thinking every day, what is this process that I have? Because I had no idea what, I just get up in the morning and I do me, whatever I'm going to do. I don't think about it strategically. His challenging me to do that, I handle it the same way I always do. I sat down and I whiteboarded like, okay, what are the things I do? I wrote down a million things and then every day I'd start crossing off. No, I guess that's not that relevant. And essentially over probably a year, it took me to figure it out. I started noticing just like the day I got fired, there were very specific steps that I implement and do time and time again that are able to get me out of these low moments and get back to, more confident growth moments.
And that's really the game, right? Is continually like picking ourselves up from these different obstacles. So obviously that's something that we all need. I'm really excited for your book launch, by the way. I think that's going to be awesome. And as I told you in our last time we chatted, the title is super, super catchy, super catchy. And I think it's got this big, curiosity promise to it. How'd you come up with the title? Like, was it a process of collaboration, brainstorming with other people, or did it just hit you all of a sudden?
Okay, so this is funny. My first book that I self-published, right when I got fired, I wrote and self-published a book, and that was called Confidence Creator. In that book is a chapter called Leapfrogging Villains. And I'm a big believer in when you put something out there, you're going to get feedback, positive or negative, right? But one of the things I noticed with my first book, people would always bring up that chapter, Leapfrogging Villains, and it stuck with them. There was something catchy about that. So when I signed with HarperCollins Leadership for my new book, I told them the name of the new book is Leapfrogging Villains. And they kept saying, working title, working title. What I didn't understand is when you sign on with a publisher, it's no longer just this is what I'm going to do. You're a part of a much bigger team where you can get an opinion, but you don't get the decision. And so one of the things they did that was very smart, and I did not do this with my first book, is they took down a bunch of different names, Overcome Your Villains being one of them, Leapfrogging Villains being one of them, and many others that they came up with. And they went to market and did research, right? So they sat in front of groups and they gathered data, and data doesn't lie. And they came back to me and they knew I was married to my title. It was my title. And they said, we've got some tough news to break to you. We're going to send you a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet came over and it was so clear to me. It wasn't even an emotional decision. I said, Overcome Your Villains is the title. Let's go with it.
From a copy perspective, I can see why it's good as well because it has the word "your" in it. So I'm immediately like, my villains? I have villains? Like, tell me about these villains. What is a villain, Heather? Like, how would you describe or define a villain?
My gosh, a villain can be sneaky, right? I've had times in my life where I had really good friends that would kind of always, make little digs at me or talk about how perfect their lives were. And again, this isn't about them, it's about you, or in this case, about me. To me, that person ended up really being a villain in my life because whenever I would be around that person, I didn't feel good about myself anymore. I started putting myself down, right? So sometimes a villain can be a pandemic, right? It can be a situation that you're experiencing that is challenging you and upsetting you and causing you hardship. A villain can be yourself. And typically at the end of the day, that's the biggest villain we all face is that villain that lies in between our own two ears.
Oh, that's like empowering to hear, but it's also it's terrifying, right? That like sometimes we can be our own worst villain, our own worst enemy. And I think it's like a shock to a lot of people because it takes like becoming responsible for what's going on in your life
Mm.
or checking in with yourself and being like, am I creating any of this? How do you or how would you like realize that you might be the villain within your own life? Like, because that takes like a lot of self awareness. Like, how can a person even start to go like, am I getting in my own way here?
For me, this is how I figured it out. I had to get rid of the villains around me to start
Mm,
acknowledging the villain within me. Because as you mentioned earlier, the more I had negative people that were toxic around me, I could keep pointing the finger out, right? Which was okay.
yeah.
It makes sense. They're treating me terrible. I just got passed over for this, or, I didn't get copied on this. There was always people to blame as long as I allowed myself to be surrounded by villains. The minute I fired those villains, I was left to deal with myself. And that's when the light went on. Wait a minute. Not only did I have all these villains around me, but this one right here has been here for a long time. It's time I start addressing this.
Okay, that totally makes sense. That totally makes sense because it's almost like when there's nothing else to blame, we spend a little bit more time internally. And honestly, it almost is like we're moving up the hierarchy of needs a little bit. Like we've taken care of our like security, like okay, I feel safe now, like no one's attacking me, and we start to think a little bit more critically about what's going on and how to become a better person. I love that. Brilliant. So Heather, now that you are in this world of running your own company, having your own books, there's so much to it, as you said, and it's the abyss. You could choose to launch a new product tomorrow. There's no metrics unless you set them for
Mm-hmm.
yourself. There's a lot to do there, and it's so far beyond any job in corporate America, like in terms of the skill sets you have to learn and anything like that. What parts of it all to you, for you, like really get you in the zone? Like, if you could have those thousand people around you, like what would be the pieces that only you do?
Oh my gosh. Well, the writing, the speaking, the interviewing on my podcast, the actual like action items, that is me. That is my strength, thinking up ideas for the future. That's how I love to spend my time. I hate accounting. I hate spreadsheets. I hate detail, right? I'm not that guy. I never have been. And what was great in corporate America is I had the resources to surround myself with, multiple people to take over those roles that I am weak in. I don't want to figure out how to be a
Mm,
CPA. It's never going to be my passion, right? So to me, it's how can I farm that out? The more challenging thing is when you're starting out, as you know, on your own and you
yes.
don't have all those resources and you have to say, Heather, sit down on the weekends when you have the time to fill out the spreadsheets and start documenting, all this information. So that part is it's never easy.
No, and there really isn't like a good solution, right? Because you're a new business, it's a startup, there's no profit yet, there's no budget other than the money you put into it yourself or you go raise capital. So it's like, well, what am I going to do? I can't just start hiring 19 people. So basically, yeah, you're forced to learn a lot of things, right? Which over time, I think is a beautiful thing. It makes you a more well rounded person. And when you do hire that person and you bring them into your team, you kind of have already played and dabbled with accounting enough to know what a really good controller would look like for your company. So it's kind of, would you say in the end it's kind of a good thing or
To me, that's my least favorite part of being
yeah.
an entrepreneur. I love the fact that I have one person to check in with and we go make decisions when I feel like, you know what, we're
Mm,
doing this. We go all in. I hated that about corporate America. I could have great ideas and it would take a year or 2 years to
mm,
actually execute, right? There were so many levels of approval. But the part I really don't like is having to do these jobs that I just have
yeah.
no passion for.
Yeah. Well, you're the talent. That's basically what you're saying. You want to be the talent, you show up, you are the face of it and you get propelled out there. And over time it only gets easier. So I'm excited for you, but it's funny because we're very similar. That's what gets me in the zone. That's what gets me into flow. It's the writing, it's the speaking to people, it's the connecting, it's the sharing of ideas, and as you said, the strategy of like how you go to market. So in this next phase, what are you focused on? What's next? You obviously have the book launch coming. What's next? Where are you spending your time?
What's funny is that the pandemic taught me not, I used to think to myself, at this age, I'm going to be doing this. In the 5 year
Yeah.
plan is this. And I've sort of, I'm not doing that to myself anymore. I'm being much more open-minded that I'm going to be led to the right opportunity, or I'm going to see something. And I was so fixated, even when I first got fired. I wanted a clothing brand. I wanted to partner with a
Hmm.
billion-dollar partner. It had to be this way. When my book did well, I want a movie to come out about the book. I had to have certain, and now I say, wait, forget that. All right, let's look at where are we today in this present moment? What's going well that, where's the best ROI, how I'm spending my time for the objectives I have in front of me. And then what can I open my mind to that could be a possibility for the future based on the conversations I have, the
Hmm.
businesses I learn about. But I'm really trying not to get myself planted in it's got to be this next
Yeah.
thing.
Oh, that's brilliant. Like you're being present and you're not attached to a specific outcome. That's great because that can be really stressful. And then it doesn't work out the way that you thought, and it's kind of different. And instead of being grateful, you're kind of like, well, wait a second, this didn't go, this wasn't part of the plan. In the time that you've been working for yourself, you've accomplished a lot of things. You've probably made a lot of deals. What's been the thing that you think has been the best move looking back? Like, ooh, that was a really smart move. I'm glad I did that.
Oh my gosh. There's a lot of them. But again, I don't know. I haven't, in my opinion, as an entrepreneur, I haven't hit that one tipping point. And I say this to everyone. I don't know what that one thing is that I'm missing yet to really, that I'm going to be able to look back in the future and say that was the day. And maybe
Hmm.
it's going to be when this book launches. I don't know, right? But I have seen a lot of micro moments. For example, when I landed on the Elvis Duran show, and halfway through that interview, he looked at me and he said, well, obviously you're writing a book. And I had never thought that I could be an author because I had a smart sister and I was the social sister. And I just never, in that moment, that man changed the trajectory of my
Wow.
business in that one conversation and that one belief he imparted in me. So that's kind of one of my micro moments I go back to say, I started down a different path because of that conversation.
Wow. And you're right. There's a lot of these micro moments we all have, and it's hard to know which one is going to be the seed that like expands the reach, right? Expands the vision. But I totally agree. Some of the things that I've been working on have taken years to come to fruition. Years and years and years. I think I mentioned this to you. I'm not sure. But like my book journey that I just got my first traditional book deal started like 7 years ago. Like I wanted to do it back then, but the timing wasn't right, and then the market wasn't right, and then the proposal took forever, and then I went, oh, let me just start this business instead, and it just takes time, and you never know. But the seed was there, like all along. So TBD, right? You see, like, oh, was the business the thing? Was the book the right idea? It's really hard to tell. But I think ultimately what you're talking about, it takes a really experienced entrepreneur to say that or to get to that moment of like removing attachment to outcomes is kind of what I heard. It's like I know what I have to do is show up to the best of my ability and make these things happen and stop having the 5, 10, 15 year plan. And I actually see this with my audience a lot, and I'm sure you do with yourself, especially younger people. They're so antsy and like impatient to get to that moment. And often the messages I get are like, Arman, like, I don't feel successful at all. And I need to go so far to be like this or like you or like that or whatever it is that they've created in their minds. What do you tell people when they're like, I don't feel successful, I'm working my ass off and I'm not getting anywhere?
I tell them my real life that on the outside, you might think I look so incredibly successful. And I am super proud of what I've achieved in a short window of time. However, it doesn't mean my finances are anywhere near where they need to be right now. So people oftentimes just see things through rose colored glasses. They don't really know
Mm.
the challenge happening, within. So it is a great moment when I speak to someone where I can share with them, hey, my struggle's real. This, I'm not sitting over here just counting the cash and doing this because I'm a nice person and I want to help others. This is a business for profit that I am in the grind on. But I like to stop myself and remember I didn't start out as a chief revenue officer in media. I started out as an account executive in radio, hustling on the streets, knocking on
Mm,
doors for years before I made it to, VP, then EVP. That so it was a progression, and I constantly remind myself that. And when the naysayers come and say, "Well, it doesn't look like you're doing as well as you thought you would. You should
mm,
probably pack it up and go back." I remind myself, you know what? It took me 20 something years to make it in media, to
wow.
become a chief revenue officer. I've been in this game now almost 4. I'm going to cut myself a little bit of slack. Yes, I'm going to keep working hard. Yes, I'm going to keep going out there and trying and testing different things, but I'm not going to beat myself up. I am really, to your point, going to try to focus on patience. And the craziest thing, Arman, happened the other day, which this was like a big moment for me. When I wrote
Mm,
my first book, because I was coming off a lot of success in corporate America, I just figured, oh, I'll show up as an entrepreneur and whatever I touch is good. I know success, I know business, I know sales. I've got this, right? I've got all the experience. I was wrong. I didn't, because I didn't understand that I
me
was
too.
jumping off into darkness and didn't know where I was going. Okay, so that was a reality check. I had decided my first book would be a #1 bestseller. I'd make millions off the first book, which would afford me to invest in some of these other ideas that I
Mm,
had, like a clothing line and some things I wanted to build that I needed capital for. It didn't happen, right? Book did well relative to books, but I wasn't making millions of dollars or anywhere close. It wasn't sustainable, right? So I thought, okay, this whole idea flopped and it didn't work out. And I thought I'd be in Forbes as like the one book to read this year. None of that happened. Wouldn't you know, this is so crazy. I kind of forgot about the book because I learned I could make more money in the speaking business to, close that gap quickly to accelerate revenue. So I went all in on the speaking business, which led me to my TED
mhm.
Talk. And during all this time, I'm just going about trying to focus on what's the quickest revenue drivers for me so I can get some capital. And I'm not thinking about the book anymore. And then I pitched the new book and I'm working on the new book and I'm starting to promote the new book. Wouldn't you know, last week, Forbes ran an article, the top 5 books for women in business in 2021. And guess who was on there? My book from 2018. And
What?
that moment, I started crying because I said, I envisioned this stuff happening. I just didn't envision it in the right time. I've
Yeah.
got to give myself more grace. I'm so proud of this product and this book and of seeing that it is, starting to get recognized now. But I thought it was going to happen overnight, and it's happening now,
Mm.
3 years later.
Wow, that's such a cool story. And thank you for sharing the real journey of what it's like, because so many people bullshit around and just try to create this facade, and then they're selling this thing that they aren't even.
Oh,
It's a
we see
lot
that
of
everywhere.
hucksters everywhere. There's a lot of bullshit out there. But it's so funny. So the most interesting part of that, you're absolutely right. First of all, by the way, that's amazing because the best books are like a slow growth process where they become perennial over time. The books that just like come out, hit the list and drop and flop, like no one ever remembers those books. They kind of go MIA. So that is huge that it's starting to take that trajectory now. And then you have the second book coming out that's going to like propel the first book, and yeah, the whole thing is just awesome. But if we sit there and we get attached to like, well, it has to be on Forbes, and then you wake up one day and it's on Yahoo, and you're like, you should be happy for that. Like it's an exciting thing, but we get too caught up in those details of what it's supposed to look like. I have to share. You said, kind of like the naysayers coming out and the 20 years it took to be successful. I had the exact same thing. So I left corporate America 10-ish years ago. And at the time, I had a good, great, well paying job at Google. And I thought it's only going to take me like 6 months to make way more money because
Of
entrepreneur,
course.
unlimited ceiling, like, like it should be quick, like no problem. It took me over 3 years. And I'll never forget in like year 2.5 ish, one of my friends, Heather, made a comment because he could tell he was like, "You're not rich yet." It's like, okay. And he literally was like, "Hey man, like it's okay. It's okay to like give up, you know? Just go back to doing what you do." Like just literally, and he was just projecting his own story because prior to that comment, he was always asking me and admiring like, how can I do what you're doing? How can I kind of like, I hate my job. I hate my job. He tell me all the time. But then he made a comment like that, and I was like, dude, are you serious? Like, you want to leap, but then at the same time, you're putting me down for trying and grinding. Like, it takes time. I'll never forget. And so many friends made those little villain comments that you're talking about. And I put them in a different category, Heather. I knew it. I was like, the friends that are there with you, that are willing to celebrate with you, that's great. But the friends that are willing to commiserate with you when you're down, that's a real friend. And who's willing to pick you up and be like, you got this. It's going to take time. Like, those villains are tricky, Heather. Those villains are tricky. I couldn't agree more. So I'm very excited for you. Whoop, slammed the mic there. I'm very excited for you. Overcome Your Villains is coming out. I highly recommend everyone watching and listening to please pre-order and support you. How else can my audience support you, and any closing thoughts in general of ways we can support or anything you'd like to share?
Well, if they go to overcomeyourvillains.com, I put together a $500 bonus bundle of products that everyone's going to get for free. As long, all they have to do is pre-order the book for $24. You get my video course, you get my workbook, you get the first chapter of the book. I mean, I put so many things in this bonus bundle to make it worthwhile for everyone to get ahead of the launch date, which is happening November 9th. I'm on social media everywhere at Heather Monahan, and my podcast is called Creating Confidence with Heather Monahan.
Yes. Check out my episode on Heather's podcast.
Yes.
Thank you, Heather. Really appreciate you. Thanks for spending time with me.
Right back at you. Thank you, Arman.
Thank you. Awesome.